Oh boy.
When I wake up each day, I feel so weary. Try to face the world, but it's so dreary. But I found that special thing that makes me cheery. Time to do music theory. Music theory.
You're watching Adventures in Music Theory with your host, Dr. Robbins.
Hey, it's May. Welcome to online voice leading class on Friday, May the 1st. We're going to talk more about secondary dominance today, but before we do, I want to talk a little bit about homework for this class, because as you know, I give a lot of homework in this class. I warned you all about that early on, and that's certainly been a threat I made good on. Next week is our last week of classes. And then the week after that, we have your final exam. And I'll talk more about how the final exam is going to work later. But one of the college policies is that no homework can be assigned after the last week of classes. So the last day that I'll accept homework is next Thursday, May the 7th. That's technically the last day of classes. So if there's any homework for this class that you intend on doing, you have to hand it in to me by Thursday, May the 7th. After that, I'm not going to take it and grade it. Now I'm going to say something else though, and it's important. So I want you to really listen and really focus on what I'm saying now. It's not bad news. I think you'll like it. But take note of what I'm about to say next. It's something that you'll want to make sure you've paid attention to. You don't have to do the homework that I've assigned since we started doing this course online. I've actually gone through and listed the assignments that I've made since we started doing this as an online course. There are about 6 or 7 of them. If you have not turned those in, you do not have to turn those in. If you have turned them in, that's great. You've probably already gotten them back from me, graded as best I can on the computer. But my thinking on it is this. The main reason I've been assigning homework since we went online, the main reason I've been wanting you to turn in homework since we went online is so I can see how you're doing with what we're studying. There are basically 3 ways that usually happens. One is when we're coming to class and you all ask questions and I can sort of see the expressions on your face and figure out if things are getting through or not. Obviously, I don't really have that at my disposal anymore. The other is when I give you all tests. Those evaluate how well you've learned things, and I can judge your performance from that. And we've done tests and you all have gotten your tests back from me. But the third way, and really I would say the most powerful way, is by doing the homework, because I get a lot of regular feedback from everybody in the class and I get to tell you how you're doing with the things we're learning. That's why I kept assigning homework after we went online, is I wanted to continue being able to have that avenue of communication available with you, where I could see what you were thinking was going on with what we were learning, and I could give you some feedback on how you were doing at learning the concepts. And as I've mentioned, even before we left for our break and then online class revision, I mentioned to you before that I was grading the homework very leniently this semester because I was more interested in getting people to turn it in than I was in giving people high grades or low grades on it. So, if you haven't been doing the homework, and if it's too much of a pain to turn it in, don't turn it in. That's okay. I'll average your grade without it. All those homework assignments that were made since we went online will not be given zeros. They'll just be left blank, and they won't affect your grade one way or another. If you've been intending to turn them in and you want to, you may, but understand that the later you turn them in, the less valuable they are. Because, when you turn in a homework assignment that I made on Monday and I give it back to you by Wednesday, then we really have a good sense of how well are you doing grasping the concepts that we're talking about. And I can get in and I can give you advice and help and guidance early. So, we're all dealing with a lot these days. And I know that learning how to do college online is new for every single one of us, including, in fact, especially me. So I certainly don't want having to turn in homework assignments for this class to be one more issue you have to deal with at a time when you're dealing with lots of issues, like how to handle online college, living at home with your parents again. Maybe there are things going on in your family with health or with jobs or something like that that sort of make life more urgent in other areas. Certainly doing some theory homework just because teacher says so isn't something I want to be something that's going to count against you. So if you haven't done those homework assignments since we went online, don't worry about it. You're good. If you do them, it certainly helps you. And it certainly helps me to know how you're doing, because I am trying to make sure you all get everything you need out of this. In part because I want you to learn this and get your money's worth and be good at it. In part because I have to teach you all the next level of stuff for this in the fall. And it's better that you know this well so that we're ready to hit the ground running when we get back in our still very newly refurbished classroom, since we haven't gotten to use it. So, if you have questions about this, email me. But hopefully you all will see this as something that might lift some stress from your lives. So, you're welcome. All right, so let's talk about some actual music now, shall we? And this is one of the examples from your textbook. And I've got it here in all its glory with its pop chord symbols, with its Roman numerals, with the non-chord tones circled. Oh, and just duh, with the actual notes that make up the music. And I want to look at what's going on there. I want to listen to it a time or two as well, so that you all can sort of get a feel for what these things sound like, as well as just how to spot them on the page or how to write them when I ask for them or something like that. I want you to also be taking into account that there is a sound that these secondary dominants bring to the music and create, and it makes it sound different and cooler. And on the easy reason why is because, well, we get to hear more notes than we'd hear if we just stayed in the key. This chromaticism means we get to hear some extra notes. There's more going on. So let's listen to this. And I'm actually not at my house. I'm at my parents' house now. So before I left town yesterday, I recorded this on my piano in Spartanburg. So let me play it for you. I won't be able to talk while it plays, but here is a badly done version of me playing it. All right, so that's the best I can play. And I hope that when you heard that, you got to notice the way that certain dissonant elements helped that piece be a little bit more developed and sophisticated. We've got all the non-chord tones, which, as we learned early on, one thing that makes a non-chord tone a non-chord tone is that it's dissonant because it doesn't fit into the chord that it's occurring over. So we've got tension coming from those non-chord tones. And then we've also got an element of tension being introduced into this piece by those chromatic chords, which are secondary dominants. The the D7 chord brings a C natural, which isn't part of a D major scale, or the E7 chord brings a G sharp, which isn't part of a D major scale. So that chromatic element also increases the tension in this piece. And hopefully as you were listening, you noticed that whenever a secondary dominant chord was happening, it created an element of harmonic interest, because it was a tension creating chord. It made us expect the next chord more. You know, when I play that 5-4-2 of 4, we expect to hear a 4 chord. When in the second line down there, when we hear that 5-6 of 6 chord, we expect to hear a 6 chord. It tonicizes those chords. And of course the things that help those chords do that are the notes from outside the key of D. If you look at all those chords that are labeled 5 of whatever, they have some note going on that's not part of D major. In fact, if you look at the one at the beginning of the second line, the F sharp major chord with A sharp in the bass, the 5-6 of 6, that's a good example of one of those secondary dominants you can create without using a major minor 7th chord, with just using a triad. Because in order to make the F sharp major triad, I have to do something chromatic. I have to add the A sharp that's not part of the key signature. And that A sharp is the secondary leading tone of that chord. I want to listen to it again, and I'm going to show you a slightly different diagram of the piece. Same notes, but instead of having non-chord tones circled, I've gone through and I've put in red arrows that show how the 7th of each chord resolves down by step to a note in the next chord. And I've put in blue arrows that show the resolution of the secondary leading tones. So let's listen to that one now. So here are those arrows I told you about. And something that it's worth taking note of with this particular musical excerpt is this is written like piano music, not like choral music. You know, a lot of times when we're doing our chorale style things, when we're stacking up soprano, alto, tenor, bass, things look more simple rhythmically. And a lot of these things that we're seeing with resolutions of sevenths and secondary leading tones look a little bit more easy and direct as well. Like for instance here, you'll notice a lot of times when there's a 7th in a chord and it resolves, it doesn't resolve on the very next note. A lot of times there are a lot of other notes that get in the middle. Like if you look in the second measure, that C natural is the 7th of that D7 chord. And it resolves down by step to the B at the beginning of the next measure. But between the time the C is played and then that B is played, there are 5 other notes that happen above it. And that's okay. You know, that's how piano music works. It's part of what makes piano music sound good, is the idea that instead of just playing chord, 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 piano players break the chords up into arpeggios to make the music a little bit more challenging and a little bit more interesting and a little bit more piano music sounding. It's what they call idiomatic writing. So in that D7 chord that's going to G, that's going to tonicize G, the F sharp is the secondary leading tone. So that F sharp wants to go up to a G, but it doesn't go up to a G until the next chord that has a G in it shows up. And you'll notice that it resolves on the second 8th note of the measure. So, you know, throughout here you'll see these slightly longer range resolutions of notes, and that's fine. That's the nature of piano music. That's not anything wrong that's happening at all, but I wanted you to be aware of that. And of course, you know, the other thing to be aware of is every secondary dominant has a secondary leading tone, whether it's a 7th chord or a triad, you know, because even that one that's just a triad in the second line there has a secondary leading tone. Now, only the ones that are major minor seventh chords have sevenths in them, but you'll see how strictly this is adhering to that principle I told you about, which is that sevenths move down by a step to resolve, secondary leading tones move up by a half step to resolve. And let's look at another example from the textbook now. This example does look a little bit more like chorale style writing. In fact, it is chorale style writing. So, we're not going to have arpeggios to deal with and a lot of notes getting between the resolutions of our notes. And I'm not going to show you quite as detailed of a diagram on this, but this is just sort of a little passage I've got to demonstrate some of the issues we have to deal with when we start introducing secondary dominants into the music and we start letting in these chromatic chords, which means we're going to have notes that aren't part of the scale we're in. And this is in F minor. And the thing about F minor is, minor keys don't always use just the key signature anyway. We've got harmonic and melodic minor out there, which means that you might find yourself raising the sixth or seventh notes of the scale. So, if this piece was in A flat major, then anything with an accidental in front of it would be some sort of a secondary chord. But since this is in F minor, there are going to be some cases where we see a note that's got an accidental in front of it, and that's not really an accidental that's coming from outside of the scale. It's just coming from the way minor scales work, where we create leading tones by raising the seventh notes, or sometimes we raise the sixth notes. So a piece in F minor, it might raise the E flat to E natural when it needs a leading tone. Or if it's doing that raised sixth and seventh note for melodic minor, it might raise the D natural as well. So when we look through this, we're going to see, so there's some chords here that just have D naturals or E naturals. Maybe it's just in F minor. But this piece is actually tricky because there are ways we want to analyze some of the chords here in spite of the fact that in F minor it's perfectly natural to raise E up a half step and D up a half step. So let's listen to this first. So the first chord's easy, right? It's the tonic chord in F minor, so that's sort of what helps us know we should analyze this in F minor. And the second chord is also simple. It's got a note in it with an accidental in front of it, but we realize that's not a secondary dominant. That E is just the leading tone in F minor, and that's a C7 chord, and really all those notes in that second chord are part of the F minor scale. That's just a 5-6-5 chord. The chord in the little pink box at number 3, though, that's one I want to talk about. Because on the one hand, a person might look at it and say, well, can't you just slip a D natural into F minor and say it's that raised sixth note from the melodic minor scale? And sometimes that's true, but in this particular case, we don't want to do that. And the reason we don't want to do that is because look at the whole chord in that pink box. When that D natural shows up, it creates a major triad with an added minor seventh, a major minor seventh chord. And what's the deal with major minor seventh chords? They're always 5-7 chords. So we want to call it 5-7, and it's rooted on B flat. So we want to call it 5-7 of whatever's 1 when B flat's 5. That's E flat. So E flat is the subtonic, the seventh in F minor. So we're going to call it 5-6-5 of 7. And then it goes to 7. And when you hear it, that chord in the pink box at number 3 there, it sounds like a dominant seventh chord. You can, even if you've never heard this before, you know that the chord it wants to go to is that E flat chord that comes afterwards. It's got a strong pull to it. So this is one of those places where you have to be sort of sophisticated about how you analyze the chord. You wouldn't want to say that's just a chord in F minor, even though we can justify all the pitches in it. But you'd want to say, since it's a major minor seventh chord, that chord quality, being a dominant seventh chord, overrides everything. And it means we want to say it's a 5-7 chord of some type. And I'm going to play that much again, and I want you to really take note of what it sounds like when that B flat 7 chord in the little pink box there goes to the E flat chord. Notice how much that B flat 7 chord sounds like the dominant of the chord that comes afterward. Hopefully you noticed how much that B flat 7 chord really seemed to want to lead to the E flat chord. And now I want to look at two other things here, these other two chords that I've put in little colored boxes. One of them totally looks like it could be a secondary dominant because it's got a note added to the chord that's not part of the F minor scale. And one of them absolutely doesn't look like it's a secondary dominant because it doesn't have anything going on that's not covered by the key signature. But here's the weird thing. It's actually the reverse here. The chord that doesn't have any notes that are outside the key signature, the chord at number 4 there in the little green shaded box, that's a secondary dominant. It's 5-7 of 3. And the reason we want to analyze it that way is because of chord quality again. That chord is a major triad with a minor 7th chord. And anytime we get those major minor 7th chords, we label them 5-7. So even though we didn't actually have to add anything outside the key signature to make that a secondary dominant, it's a secondary dominant because it sounds like one because of that major minor 7th quality to it. When you hear that chord, and I'm going to give you a chance to hear it again in a minute, you know that an A flat chord's probably going to be coming up on the other side of it, and it does. So 5-7 of 3 going to 3. By the way, this is the only place in all of music theory where this happens. The only secondary dominant you can write without using notes that aren't in the key signature is 5-7 of 3 in a minor key. All of the others are going to have something added to them, but that's just 5-7 of 3. And since it's a major minor 7th chord, that's how we have to label it. And then that very, very last chord at the end of the line, it's got an A natural. That's not part of the key signature. It's not a note that's part of F minor. But that note's not a secondary dominant. It's not serving to tonicize any chord that comes next. It's the last chord. Y'all can probably figure out what it is. All it is a Picardy third to put a major chord at the end of a minor key passage. But this passage here is useful to illustrate what's going to be increasingly true as we go through chromatic harmony next semester, which is that this stuff gets trickier when you start thinking about all the things that can happen. Analyzing just secondary dominants isn't that difficult. But then when you get in an actual piece of music, maybe a composer doesn't want to write just secondary dominants. Maybe she wants to write, diatonic chords and some of those other weird chromatic chords I'll be teaching you about next year. And once you get in music where anything can happen, that's where you have to know everything so you know what to look for. And this shows you that a little bit. This is a piece with a key signature, but then the key signature doesn't cover everything. But we can't just say, oh, well, anything that's not covered by the key signature could be raising the 6th and 7th notes in minor keys. Because it could be, or it could be that things not covered by the key signature create secondary dominants, which are tonicizing chromatic harmonies. Or it could be that sometimes just a Picardy third shows up. So learning how to discern what's going on is a lot of the trick to learning how to analyze music well and hear music well. and probably write music well, and probably play music well. So let's listen one more time, and I want you to notice the pull of those two secondary dominants, the 5-7 of 7 to 7 from the second to third measure, and then the 5-7 of 3 to 3 from the third from the last to the second to last measure. And now we come to the part where we conclude by talking about some homework. And this is, and feel free to get out your tissues and weep profoundly now, this is the final homework assignment I am going to give you this semester. There will be no more until next fall. And then don't worry, there will be oh so much. But this is the last one for this year. So what I'd like you to do is some part writing using figured bass. And I can tell you that on the bass, or on the exam, I'm definitely going to have some figured bass style part writing show up. So this will be time well spent. And I thought we'd work through, it's Unit 13, Assignment 4. There are 3 of them. I thought we'd do the first one online here. So if you want to stick around for that, fine. If not, your homework for Monday is turn in number 2 and 3 in Unit 13, Assignment 4. I'm going to try to streamline the process here a little bit. Instead of going through and actually writing everything all the time, I've got a little reminder there at the bottom of the page that a chord 7th needs to go down by step. A secondary dominant, secondary leading tone needs to go up by step. So whenever a red arrow shows up in our part writing, it's showing you a 7th resolving down a step. Whenever a blue arrow shows up, it's showing a secondary leading tone resolving up by half step. And of course, when it's over, then I'm going to want to go through and put some Roman numerals on this so we can understand what's happened. So the very first chord, I've set it up for you in the 4 voices. It's got a 6-5 underneath it. So that lets you know something. 6-5 is the figured bass symbol we associate with a first inversion 7th chord. So we know that chord's got a 7th in it. So when we go to part write this progression and add the soprano, alto, and tenor voices above the bass line, one thing we want to make sure happens is whenever a 7th chord shows up, we want its 7th to get resolved the right way, and that's down a step. So in that first chord there, if it's 6-5, that means that A in the bass is the 3rd. So the root of the chord is actually an F, and this is an F, A, C, E flat chord. So the 7th of the chord is that E flat in the tenor, and we're going to want to make sure when we go into the next chord that the 7th of that chord, that E flat, goes down by step to a D. And that next chord, it's got a B flat in the bass and nothing underneath it. So that next chord, that B flat's just the root of a triad. It's a B flat D F chord. So that E flat has to resolve down to D because it's a 7th. And then with the rest of the part writing, we just want to not mess it up. One good way to not mess it up is to ask yourself this: are there any common tones going from the first chord to the next chord? If the answer is yes, it's a good idea to try to hold them. So there is a common tone between an F, A, C, E chord and a B, D, F chord. It's that F in the alto voice, so let's just keep it where it is. And then in the soprano, we just need to move to something in a B flat D, F chord. It would make most sense to go either up a step to D or down a step to B flat. I like down a step to B flat. So that's what we're going to do there. And now we're set to go to the next chord. So maybe this next chord looks scary, but it really shouldn't. It looks scary because it's got a lot of numbers underneath the bass note, but those numbers are great. You know, if you've got to write 3 voices and you've got 3 numbers, that tells you everything to do. You don't have to sit there and wonder what to double. Just follow the numbers and you'll have it made. Because remember, numbers are just intervals above the bass note. So when it says 6-4-3, it means that above that D in the bass you need to write a 6th and a 4th and a 3rd. And a 3rd above a D is an F, and a 4th above a D is a G, and a 6th above a D is a B. So those are the notes we want to write. And it's just a matter of figuring out where's the best place to write them. A lot of times the whole move by step or common tone thing will answer that. So a sixth above a D is a B, and we just had B flat in the soprano at the beginning of the measure, so let's put B on above the bass in the soprano. And we've got to do a little bit more because there's a natural sign next to the six. And remember, whenever there's an accidental next to a number, it means put this accidental on that number above the bass. So in addition to writing a B above the bass note D, we want to put a natural sign on it, like that. So that's not quite a common tone, but it was close. There is one straight-on common tone, and it's that G in the alto. That's a fourth above the D, so we'll just keep the G in the alto, which means the F has to go to the tenor, and the tenor has two Fs in his range, a high F and a low F. You want the high F here, because if you wrote the low F, two bad things would happen. One is the tenor would be too far away from the alto, it would be more than an octave away. And the other thing is if the tenor jumped down to that low F, it would overlap the bass voice, B flat, and the chord before it. So this is how we do this chord. See, it's not that bad. And let's talk about how to resolve it into the next chord. Now the chord we just wrote has 6-4-3 underneath it, and the 4-3 part lets us know that it's a seventh chord in second inversion. The reason why there's a 6 added to it is because we had to put the 6 there so people know to put the natural sign on the note of sixth above. But the 4-3 means it's a seventh chord, so that means it has a seventh, and we've got to figure out what the seventh is. The D in the bass would be the fifth if it's a 4-3 chord, so the root would be G. So this chord's G, B, D, F. That F, which is in the tenor voice, is our seventh. So we're going to want it to resolve down a step to an E flat in the next chord. And the next chord has a 6 underneath it. That means it's an inverted triad. So that's the third. The E flat in the bass is the third. So the root is C. So we need to put a C somewhere. And we also need to consider whether there are any common tones between the G, B, D, F chord and this C, E flat, G chord. And again, that G in the alto is a common tone, so we'll hold it over, and we'll put the soprano up a step on C natural, which is sort of where that B natural makes us want to go anyway. Let's keep going. So we just wrote a triad, and that B natural that we wrote there, by the way, that would be a secondary leading tone that resolved up to C in that C minor chord. And the chord at the end of the measure, it's got 6-4 underneath it. That means it's a triad in second inversion. And remember, there are weird things about triads in second inversion. They have to be primary triads, like 1 or 4 or 5. They tend to be passing or cadential or arpeggiated or pedal or whatever. This one, by the way, is passing. You can look at that bass note and see how the 6-4 chord's being approached. We come at it from an E flat, and then we keep going up by steps away from it. So it's some sort of passing 6-4 chord. And the thing that matters here is in a passing or in any 6-4 chord, you have to double the bass note. That's the fifth of the chord. So we're going to want 2 Fs in this chord. It's just a B flat D F chord, by the way, but you want to make sure you double the F because you double the bass note in a 6-4 chord. And don't double the F in the tenor voice, because if you do, you'll get parallel octaves. So even though the tenor could go by step from E flat to F, you don't want it to do that, because that's what the bass is doing. You'll have your parallel octaves there. So look at your alto and soprano voice and figure out, is there somebody there who's in a good position to get to F? And the answer is, yeah, the alto could step right down to F, approach it in contrary motion, no bad parallels. So we need a B flat D F chord. And if we want to keep things nice and simple, we can move our other 2 voices down by step. We can take the tenor down by step to D, and we can take the soprano down by step to B flat. And by the way, notice that we do have to put a flat sign on the B flat in the soprano because there was B natural 2 beats before. So we need to fix that. All right, so we're getting on. We're ready to go to the next measure. Okay, so from our 6/4 chord, we're going to, it looks like a first inversion 7th chord because it's got 6/5 written underneath it. So if F is the third of a 7th chord, the other notes are a D and then F and an A and a C. So I need to add a D and an A and a C to this chord. So when I go to do that, I would recommend putting the D in the tenor voice. You know why? That's our common tone. We're not moving. And then we need to get an A and a C somewhere. I've got a G and a B flat. So the B flat can go by step to the A or the C. It would make the most sense for it to go to the C, because then we can take our alto voice and put it on the A, and we'll get a nice complete chord there. Probably a secondary dominant chord, given that we've got a note in it that's not part of the B flat major scale. So let's figure out how to resolve that secondary dominant chord. All right, so that 7th chord is a D, F sharp, A, C chord. Let's make our first order of business resolving the 7th of the 7th chord. That would be the C in the soprano. So we're going to resolve it down by a step to a B flat. The other thing we're doing, which I already showed on the screen there, is we're going to a triad in root position based on G. So it's a G, B flat, D chord. So we want to hold the D in the tenor voice. That's a common tone. So we've got G, B flat, and D, and then we just need to find something for the alto voice to do. Could go up by step to the B flat, could go down by step to the G. I'm choosing down by step to the G, and that works just fine, like so. Let's move on to the next chord. And this next chord is a 7th chord in root position with E flat as the root. So the notes you need for an E flat 7 chord are an E flat and a G and a B flat and a D. It'll be a major 7th chord. And if you look at where we're coming from, you realize that, wow, all the notes in the upper 3 voices are going to be part of this E flat major 7 chord. So we can keep the B flat in the soprano as a common tone. We can keep the D in the tenor as a common tone. We can keep the G in the alto as a common tone. So we can hold all of our voices over as common tones. I mean, potentially you could move them if you wanted to just try to shake things up, but I'm just trying to show you some quick, easy ways to do the part writing here. So we can keep all common tones there in this chord, and now we're ready to resolve it to the next chord. So let's resolve our E flat major 7 chord to what appears to be a root position F chord. So in that E flat, G, B flat, D chord, that D is the 7th of the chord. So it needs to move down by step to a C, which is the 5th of the FAC chord. And the other notes just need to move in such a way to not cause any trouble. Now we're in B flat major, so we don't want to double the A. That's the leading tone. But I can take that G and that B flat in my E flat major 7 chord, and I can move them both down by step. I can move the G down by step to the F. I can move the B flat down by step to the A. And I've got my 5 chord. And then we just need to get to the 1 chord at the ending here. Notice the A is the leading tone and it's in the outer voice, so that A in the soprano needs to go up to a B flat. The other thing we need to make sure of is that we don't take the C in the tenor down to an F. That'll give us parallel fifths. So we'll put it on a D. We'll keep the alto on an F. That's our common tone. And then we'll put the soprano on a B flat and resolve that outer voice leading tone. And there. That's how you put in all the notes here and follow the figured bass. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's go look at some Roman numerals next. Okay. So there are the Roman numerals added underneath. And you can see that there are a couple secondary dominants in there, and then there are also just some regular diatonic triads and 7th chords. Notice also that that 6/4 chord got identified. And this will be something to remember on the test that's coming up. If you see second inversion triads, 6/4 chords, identify whether they're passing or cadential or neighboring. That's important. If you don't do that, you're not getting everything there is to say about them, and you're not going to get them right. But if you look at these chord symbols, they explain what's going on, and you see two chords there. There are secondary dominants, a 5/4/3 of 2 and a 5/6/5 of 6. And you can notice that if you look at the chord above those symbols, you can tell by looking at it, it's a secondary dominant. I can look in the chord and I can see the accidental added that's bringing in some note that's not part of the B flat major scale. There's a B natural in one chord, there's an F sharp in another. So that lets me know I'm dealing with secondary dominants, chromatic chords right there. And of course you can also see those red arrows showing all the sevenths going down, the ones in the secondary dominants and the non-secondary dominant seventh chords. And you can also see those blue arrows showing the secondary leading tones and our secondary dominant chords moving up by step. So hopefully this makes sense. So for homework next time, like I said, the last homework, finish Unit 13 Assignment 4. There are 2 more part writing examples like the ones we just did. One has you working from pop chord symbols, but there are still going to be some secondary dominants, and the other has you working from figure bass. And for both of them, after you've done that, I want you to not just do the part writing, but also put the Roman numerals underneath telling me what the chords are. And remember, when you do the part writing, any seventh chords, seventh needs to resolve down by step. And with these secondary dominants, their secondary leading tones need to go up by step. For Monday, think about exam things you might want to know and send me questions if you have them. There's a practice exam that I will be posting on Moodle and on Google Classroom so that you can go have a try at it, and I'll put the answers out later as well. The final exam is going to be not next week, but the week after, and I'll give you more details when we start class next week. It will be cumulative of the things we've done this semester, so it will start with the chapter we did on non-chord tones, and then it'll talk about basic issues of part writing with triads and root position and inversion, talk about part writing seventh chords, and talk about analysis and part writing of secondary dominants. And I will help y'all study for that because we've got 2 whole class sessions we can devote to that. But I want you to go ahead and be thinking about it. So finish Unit 13 if you want. Remember what I said about homework. Anything I've assigned as a homework assignment since we started having class online is optional. And if you don't want to turn it in, it won't count against your grade. There's the practice exam you can try, and we're good. I have one more thing I want to do. You're probably sitting there going, hey, I know what that is. That's a picture of people. Yeah, you're right, you are. And I'm actually going to tell you who those people are. So, starting from the left and going across to the right, you have Erica Tyner Grodian, Brandy Mullinax, Carlisle Floyd, and Carrie Page Drake. You want to know what all 4 of those people have in common? They all 4 got music degrees from Converse College. I taught 3 of them. Not the oldest guy there. but all 3 of the ladies in that picture have been students of mine at some point while I've been here. And I'm showing you this picture because, as you are probably aware by now, we've been talking about the college making the move to becoming a co-ed college. And as of this week, it's been announced that we're going to be doing it a little bit more soon than we thought. We're going to be doing it starting in the fall of 2020 instead of 2021, which I realize has been a bit for y'all to wrap your brains around. So I wanted to share something that actually the lady on the left side in that picture, Erica Tyner Grodian, wrote when the decision was first announced in February that Converse was going to go co-ed. I've been saving this to share with y'all if I thought you needed it, and I didn't necessarily think you all needed it in February, but I want to share with you her thoughts on Converse going co-ed as an alumnus from the Petrie School of Music in the early 2000s. Let me read her comments to you. So these are Erica's comments. To my fellow Connies, I understand that we all have some strong feelings about the announcement that Converse is going co-ed. But to those who think the school is giving up, quote, the one thing that makes it unique, unquote, by moving away from the single gender model, I say this. You are not giving Converse enough credit. I didn't choose to attend Converse because it was a women's college. In fact, that's the main reason I almost didn't attend Converse. And though I remain grateful for the unique women's college experience I had there, I'm more profoundly grateful for the quality liberal arts education I received. The reasons that I did choose Converse are these. The faculty are amazing. Erica really did write this. I'm not sneaking this in on y'all. The community is caring. The campus is quaint and lovely. The Daniel Recital Hall is enchanting. I could go on. I loved it so much that I happily went back after my master's to teach in the School of Music for 3 years, and it was hard to leave when I decided to pursue my doctorate. Now I'm a tenured professor at a small co-ed university, and guess what? A lot of my students wear pajamas to class just like we did at Converse. And if your daughter wants to attend Converse, she can still wear pajamas to class if she wants to. So can your son. So here's my 2 cents. I refuse to pigeonhole Converse as a one-trick pony that was only special because it was once a women's college. I'm optimistic that women and men alike will feel welcome there in the future. And frankly, I'm hopeful that this will make it a little easier to find a tuba player for the orchestra. So those are Erica's comments. I thought since you all are in the music program and she was in the music program not that long ago, you all might enjoy the perspective of somebody who's a little further along on their path. But, she makes some good points, which are, I think, that, the strength of the music program is not that it's single gender. The strength of the music program is that it's such a good music program. And none of that's going to change. Incidentally, in case you want to know what these people in the picture actually do, Erica, who's on the left, who wrote the thing, she's a French horn player and teaches music history at, I think, Valparaiso University in Indiana. The lady standing next to her, Brandy Mullinax, is a singer, has sung opera, I think did her master's at Rice University in Texas, teaches private voice in Charlotte, North Carolina now, and was playing bass in a rock band on the side when I saw her last. The man standing next to her, probably one of the most famous alumni of the School of Music at Converse, Carlisle Floyd, got his bachelor's degree in music after the Second World War at Converse and is the composer in residence for the Houston Opera, teaches at Florida State University, wrote what's probably one of the most widely performed modern operas there is, an opera called Susanna. And then the lady on the right standing next to him is Carrie Page Drake, who got a music education degree from Converse and then went on to get her master's and doctorate in composition, taught composition at a couple universities, and now she and her husband, Nick, who's also a composer, and their daughter live in Spartanburg, and she and her husband teach at the South Carolina School for the Deaf and Blind. So, anyway, these are some of your forebears in the music program. And I just thought you all might like hearing somebody who's a student of Converse share their perspective of the change that's coming our way. Anyway, I hope y'all have a great weekend. I'll be back here on Monday, and we will talk exams, and y'all just take care of yourselves and stay happy. It's a pretty world. Take care.